Hello, beautiful boss babes. Are you ready to chase life with Kelly? Well, I'm your host, Kelly Chase, and I'm so excited you're here. We are going to talk about all things love, dating, relationships, money mindset. We're going to dive deep into self-love, worthiness. I am going to bring on some incredibly empowering guests. We're going to have fun, we're going to laugh, and perhaps we're even going to shed some tears together. I am here to empower you, inspire you, and motivate you to create the life you crave. I am so excited for today's episode. Let's dive in. Hi, babes. Welcome back to the show. I know that it has been some time since we chatted, but I felt so called to talk with our special guest today because mental health in particular means so much to me. And we're going to dive deep into that, as well as a movie that is coming out, which this guest stars in. And I want to welcome AnnaLynne McCord to the show. She has been on the show before. She is a actress, director, activist, and maybe possibly an alien. We don't know.
Definitely an alien.
Welcome to the show again. Thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, thanks for coming out of your Hermitville to hang out with me. I know you've been cocooning a little bit, which I love.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so catch us up. You are starring in this movie, and it is called Condition of Return, right?
Yes, Condition of Return. So we were filming it last year in 2022, and I remember the offer came in actually in the fall of 2021, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. So I immediately called my agent and said, yes, we'll do the film. Because I was like, I do not want to do this. So I definitely need to, I definitely have to, because that's just kind of how I roll. Cause I'm a weirdo like that. I bought a standard transmission manual car without knowing how to drive, because I figured if I had a car with a manual transmission, I would have to figure out how to drive it if I wanted to get anywhere. So this is kind of my MO. My little modus operandi is to just throw myself fully in and figure out how to swim later. Yeah. And I think in the process of the project coming to be, I realized that my character, once again, 22 years in, once again is a villain. It's villain. And I don't even believe in villains, but technically she's the bad guy. And you can't judge the villain if you want to play them truthfully as an actress. So I was afraid. I was afraid that I couldn't not judge her. I was afraid that I would do a disservice to the character because of the relevancy of what my character ends up doing in the film. So in the opening scene, you see her walk into a church with an AR-15, and she fires a bunch of shots into the crowd, and it was just too real. It was too now. It was too current. It's one thing to do stories of things that happened 70 years ago, or to do something in some very fantastical existence. But this film was a little too real for my comfort level. And I think that I didn't want to do it because it was going to hit. It was going to hit in a lot of really, really deep ways. And so that's why I needed to do it. But I was reticent at first. And the director and producer had no idea, because I said yes so fast. They were like, wow, she's obsessed with our script. She's so happy. And I had a wonderful conversation with them and all of the things. But from the very beginning, I said, I want to do long form, actually. I said I want to do podcasts. I want to have big conversations. I'm grateful to squeeze a bunch of sound bites into a 5-minute news interview, but it's nice to be able to come on to shows like yours and have real conversations around this this topic that requires a little bit more talking than anybody is doing about it. They're talking at it. They're not talking about it or for it or with it or anything that I think is really productive in regards to it. So I would love to, see long form be the way that we communicate about this, our own little personal town halls, so to speak, to be able to talk about the root issue, because that's not a small conversation, and it needs space and it needs room and it needs back and forth. And so the real journey for me was not, is this woman dealing with mental health concerns? Obviously. Right. Happy people don't hurt people. Happy people don't go into a church with an AR-15 and shoot everyone in the sanctuary. And what we have to do is peel the layers back and find out, from where does this unhappiness originate? And I always use children as an example, because babies are happy. They let you know when they're not. It's really quick. It's like a little tropical rainstorm. It comes in, it's immediate, and it's gone as soon as it was there. They're hungry, they're tired, whatever, cranky. It's a very quick little shift, and then they're back to homeostasis. Mm-hmm. When we live with toxic stress, cortisol and adrenaline coursing through our system day in and day out, combined with language from parents and teachers and peers and society and culture and media that is just full of toxicity and disallowance of the freedom that a child expresses naturally. Just being oneself, right? They're always like, children tell the truth. Like that's so shocking. Like it's so crazy because children tell the truth. Like, what you're insinuating, that presupposes that adults are just fucking liars, it's like, well, you're just like setting us up to be liars because you're making it so cool that children tell the truth, or so wild that children tell the truth. Children say the darndest things. No, they just say the truth. But it's crazy because we are conditioned out of truth, which means we're conditioned out of authenticity, which means we're conditioned out of joy. And when we're conditioned out of joy, we end up somewhere on the spectrum of causing harm to other people, because hurting people hurt other people. We've heard that cliche a million times. When we're conditioned out of joy, it's a slippery slope. And my character just got hit with one thing after another in this film, and the programming that had removed her from joy to begin with was exacerbated by blind faith in something that took away her sovereignty entirely, because she gave herself over to it. She wasn't co-creating with it. She was just, I must obey. And you think about the danger of obedience, right? It is a dangerous thing. It's almost like voluntary slavery. I think that's really what it is. Obedience is voluntary slavery, because you're turning yourself in and you're saying, oh, no, not in my abilities and not in my power. So I'm going to totally give myself over to something else. And I also would call that a cop-out. I'm sorry, but if you give yourself over entirely to something, especially, and with my character, it's religion, especially a religion that clearly states that the children of God are made in the image of God. Right. Okay, so he's a perfect God, but he made a shitty image of himself? Is that what you're telling me? Like, he didn't do a really good job. He painted sunsets in the sky, but you are a flawed little fuck up. He did a really bad job on you. I don't understand that way of thinking. There's a little bit, I have this handicap where I need to make sense and find logic in things. I can't find the logic. It doesn't make sense to me. So I look at other verses in the Bible that are, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. That's also in the Bible. Make in the image of, work out your own salvation. There's an invitation within these religious themes for you to use your own brain, baby. use your brain. You have one. Use it. Why do you have a brain in your skull if you're just supposed to just mindlessly do what you're supposed to do? It's not, you know, I mean, that's like, oh my gosh, that's like being with someone who's dutifully loving you. Like, oh, that sounds so nasty. Like, well, you know, it's my duty or my obligation. Like, please divorce me immediately, if not sooner. Like, do not ever love me because of an obligation. And don't you dare blame my children. Like, if I had kids and it's like, we're going to stay together for the kids. No, the fuck we are not. Yeah. That is, first of all, you're doing your children a remarkable disservice. And I don't have to have kids to know that. I was a kid. I know it because I was a child. This kind of removal of sovereignty, it's one of a couple things, and they sound like the dangerousness of obedience or the ridiculousness of a cop-out. Sorry, that's just my take. But when you see this, my character, Eve Sullivan is her name, Eve, I was like, okay, y'all have put some major symbolism in this film. There's a lot of, you know, religious symbolism and themes. But you can take it, you have to suspend your disbelief. It's a film, right? You can take it however you want to take it, but there's a devil made me do it level to the film. And if you live in the world of your mind, and if you ever actually like broach the very scary possibility of opening the door to the inside of your mind, I don't know, maybe you're a minimalist and it's just got one beautiful wall hanging and a nice mirror and a candle, or maybe you're a hoarder and all this stuff's threatening to fall out the door the second you open your mind, and it just, all this stuff just comes flying out like a jack in the box. I don't know. I was the latter.
I'm the latter too.
I was a hoarder. It was like, like, oh my gosh, like it's so inundating. Like my invasive, intrusive thoughts are nonstop. And I had to clean house because I had fallen obedient to a taskmaster mind that from one moment to the next, I was, you know, spinning plates, juggling, you know, all these different things that were full inside this hoarder house mind of mine. And there was no room for authenticity. There's no room for autonomy. There's no room for ownership of my existence and myself. There was certainly no invitation to self-love or anything nice like that. And I had been completely conditioned out of joy. So I could understand Eve when at the point of already being a little confined by a belief system that was disallowing her sovereignty due to her own perception, but a conditioned one nonetheless. She then made one big mistake that you don't do when you believe in certain things. And then she had the guilt. She had the guilt taskmaster yelling at her in her mind. How dare you? How could you? You're terrible. You're sinful. And that little tiny moment turned into a monstrous nightmare of her existence in the film. And ultimately, she did one of the worst things a human being can do as a result of a tiny moment where instead of being free and authentic and in a space of ownership for herself and her young hormones raging, instead of being able to see that as beautiful and fun and sacred, because it's gorgeous to have fun when you're young, she saw it as something that she did that was bad and that she needed to pay a debt. And she started to pay debt after debt after debt because she could never repay it. And her guilt stacked and stacked and stacked until she broke. She broke, and she got to a point where she became hopeless, without anything to lose. And those are dangerous combinations.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that I did this film that I didn't want to do, because I got to put the shoes on of a woman who I fully understood.
Mm.
And I could look at her with the compassion that I rarely had for myself, so that I could play her honestly. And in the process, I was really affected by the outside world, because when we filmed the scene where I have to walk into a church holding a very heavy piece of machinery to go massacre my fellow church people, we filmed that whole day. We went home exhausted after a really emotionally exhausting day, not to mention the stunts and the things that go into just the world of acting. And we turned on the news, and the Uvalde shooting had happened that day.
Wow.
And everything was all too real, as it had already felt all too real the whole day, but it became all too real in the world when we went home. And we came to work the next day, and a lot of the crew, a lot of us were a little bit of a mess. We were very shaken up. There were tears, there were conversations, meaningful conversations, which does make me happy. But it was heavy. It was really heavy. And I talked to the entire cast and crew that day, and I thanked them for being a part of this little passion project. And I said, what we're doing is important. And it feels like there's Rachel Pelson, I love her song, like a small boat on the ocean, setting big waves into motion, right? Like how a single word, I'm like, I love that song. I only have one match, but I can make an explosion, she says. And this is a little match, I hope it's explosive. And I don't necessarily like the analogy for what we're talking about specifically, but I'll use it because it's a beautiful song. This conversation to me is so much bigger than this. It's so much bigger than mass shootings. It's so much bigger than Catholicism. It's so much bigger than these themes and these tropes, honestly. But it's actually really simple. It's much bigger, but it's much simpler than all of this too. It's how many tiny little decisions before it's so easy to make one that looks absolutely insane.
Yeah.
How many tiny little fractures of your soul split you fully into, and you are cut off from your truth, from your self, from your soul, from your light. It's not big decisions. It's tiny little decisions over long periods of time. They erode and crack and deteriorate and destroy. And then the collapse happens, right? Then the catastrophe happens and the cataclysm occurs. We talk about climate change, right? They've got like 100+ patents to actually physically screw with our weather, like literally make cyclones and typhoons, all this stuff. It's like, how much of that, one little messing with Mother Nature, and then we wonder why things are going on in our world. We have fossil fuels, we have those things, but it's not any one thing. It's all of the little fracturing decisions that are splitting us apart, where we fully dissociated ourselves from Earth and we live on the world, right? We're in the world, but we aren't on Earth. We don't live in oneness with Earth. And I think that the simplicity of what Eve is dealing with is a disconnection from her nature, from her true nature. And I think to reconnect to that, and it might sound like it's not connected, but I think it really is a return to nature. you listen to any teacher. I love Roger Weir, and no one, I promise you, no one who listens to you, you probably don't. And I don't know a person on this earth who probably does know this man, Roger Weir, except Ben Decker, my teacher who brought me to him. This man has some of the most remarkable teachings of all times. His name is Roger Weir, Weir, and he's passed now, but Ben, my teacher, meditation, Reiki teacher, shaman, he was responsible for putting his entire education system online. Like he filmed everything, had everything or like didn't film everything, but like had it all compiled so that it could be put online so that it would be accessible. And it's so abstruse. No one knows it. No one can find it. Like 11 people have seen it in the last 20 years, but he talks about the danger of the disconnection from nature, that's where it starts. That when we started living in cities and we started being like removed from the oneness with nature, we lost something that we didn't know we lost. And it's so hard. It's one thing, you're like, where's my phone? I can't find my phone. Oh my God. You know when your phone's missing. Like you always know when your phone's missing. But what if you lose something you don't know you had?
Yeah.
Go looking for it. You don't ask where it is. And he talks about Henry Thoreau, and he talks about all of these people who just Moby Dick, what's his name? Melville. Why am I blanking on the author of Moby Dick? Oh my gosh, my brain.
Like, I don't know that.
Okay, well, Melville. Yeah, it's Melville. He completely, like, just at a certain point, just immersed himself in nature and went back and was like, I've lost something. And it's a sense of what animals have. This intuition, this instinct. Think about how human beings second guess themselves, but we also are less compassionate. We are less kind. We are less honest. We are less true. And observing nature can bring you back to this. I used to kill ants. Like, I was made to believe that there are these evil little creatures that are there to ruin your life and eat your food. That was how I was raised. And we would like a whole ant colony, just set them on fire. Like, what the hell? Like, it was totally normal and totally accepted, like totally fine. I am such a little weirdo now. I will sit there and watch little ants like get around a little crumb and how they all communicate with each other. And then they have a whole line down, like a little assembly line where their little antennas are communicating. And I'm sitting there for like 45 minutes just fascinated by these wonderful little creatures. And I'm like, I can't believe that I used to kill your ancestors. I'm so sorry. Like I'm having a whole personal meltdown. But what I found, and it's like, it's looked at as silly and judged. I'm judged for not wanting to kill, which I think is really interesting. That we should all stop and question. Oh my God, you won't kill a spider. You won't kill an ant. I won't kill. You're judging me because I don't want to kill something. Okay, I don't know who should turn the judgment little viewing glass around, but I'm thinking that it's me. But what happens when you resensitize yourself to nature and desensitize yourself to this ideology that killing meaningless things like ants is just fine. What happens is more compassion.
Yeah.
I'm kinder to everyone because I see how an ant is a part of all of this. I see how a spider is a part of all of this. It's Charlotte. It's Charlotte's bad. Like, don't kill Charlotte, And I was like, I was the queen of a raid pan, I'd be like, shh, die, little fuckers, Like, I was like really rageful. I'd take it out on ants. It was really it was really bad. Like, I would definitely, if I saw that now, I'd be like, should I call someone? Are you gonna be okay? I should call someone. You're a little bit homicide. You're homicidal at a level that I think I should let someone know. This is not good. I digress remarkably, but my point about Eve is that when we attach so strongly to a belief system, my belief system that ants were evil little creatures trying to ruin my life, for example, as a child, passed on to me by my parents. Thank you very much, y'all. But that belief system that I attached to made me so inconsiderate of really interesting creatures that I might actually enjoy observing and have fun, watching them do their little thing. But for Eve, attaching to this belief system so strongly without exercising any personal autonomy whatsoever. That's where the danger comes in. This is not about do or don't believe in your faith. Your faith can be beautiful. It can inspire compassion. It's actually what these religions typically originated as. Literally center points to where compassion extends outward. And then it became more about the rules and the rigidity and the right and wrong and the black and white cut and dry of it all. And so for Eve, there was no compassion for herself. She was a 20-something-year-old girl, and she was out one night and having the martini, and she looked cute, and she was recognized by a boy for being cute, and she felt good about it, and she probably had one more martini than she necessarily needed. And she had some fun, and she could never forgive herself. Because of what came as a result of that decision. And how often, whether we believe in a religion and ascribe it that belief system, how often do we put onto ourselves that we made a decision that has set things into motion that's just ruined everything and we can never come back from it? And it's, how often do we go back and replay that moment and relive it and we can never get beyond, we can never transcend it because we did this stupid thing. And then in that energy, what is generated from it typically is more judgment.
Yeah.
It's not always at ourself anymore. It starts to extend outward. Yeah. And again, going back to little decisions that end up in a very massive fork in the road shift of one's existence, we ultimately do something that we can't come back from. Yeah. And I think that's the part about mass shootings that struck me the most. I was all mad. I was like, they should be researching this. We should be looking into them. And then I was like, oh, they actually are researching. I didn't realize. I was like, I got all mad. I hadn't Googled it yet. And I went down the rabbit hole of the DOJ's research, and the National Institute of Justice funded an entire study on about 172 mass shootings over the span of several decades. And most of which, the percentage of how many have happened in the last 20 years comparatively to any other time in our country's history is just like, gut-wrenching. But what they found was that most of the time, these are public suicides. Yeah. These are people who have lost connection to their true nature, to their truth, to their authenticity. They've lost hope. They're in a space of despair. And I would say, because of the way I relate, and I know you and I have talked about the mental health dynamic extensively, but I would say that they feel remarkably invisible. Mm-hmm. And this is the most visible they could possibly be. They'll be on every news channel, their face, their name, they'll be everywhere. So if they can't be seen in life, perhaps they'll be seen in death. And that is something that the news media, I just recently, just this week, I was doing press for the film, and I put out a little bit of a challenge to the news media to offer us information that's of value.
Yeah.
And what value do we get out of knowing the names or seeing the faces of individuals who have massacred people in our country? We don't need to know their name. We don't need to. You can tell us the story, as toxic as all of that sensationalism can be. We do watch the news for a reason, and we are educated on current events and to know what's going on in our world, and that's absolutely understandable. And thank the U.S. Constitution for our First Amendment rights. But we have the Freedom of Information Act. If someone wants to get someone's name, they can get it in regards to a crime that's been committed. But why does it need to be everywhere? And if, in fact, the research that the DOJ has done is true, and wannabe future mass shooters are looking to these guys as inspiration, they're looking to these shooters that have gone before, it's just all right there for them. Here's their name, here's their face. You can go look them up on social media now. You can go follow them. You can go be just like them. And then you can go do exactly what they did. That's essentially what's being offered so readily. I'm just asking that we don't make it so easily available.
Right.
You know? And in the process, if this is about public suicide, take the public out of it. Don't give them that. And what you might find, because the research also states that almost 50% of the shooters that were part of these 172 shootings that were researched, almost 50% of them had told someone they were going to do it. So to me, that when I work with people who are suicidal all the time, when they're telling me, that's a good sign. That's a good sign that they're telling me, because they are crying for help. That's what they're doing, as far as my experience of working with severe trauma and individuals who are dealing with suicidality. So if someone tells you that they're going to harm themselves, we take that seriously.
Yeah.
Why were 50% of the time did no one take it serious that these individuals were planning to go out and massacre people? Because we're not looking at it. We're looking at it from a lens of like, that's ridiculous.
Right.
But to me, if we think of it like public suicide, suddenly it's different. It's not ridiculous. It's very serious. And someone needs to be 5150'd immediately. Harm to themselves and possibly to others, but definitely to themselves. So if we think of mass shootings in this regard, and we can, I really think we can, because I mean, the research also gave statistics about the amount. Like, it was literally 92% of grade school shooters were suicidal at the time of the shooting, and 100%. When do you see statistics like this? What, 90s, 100%? 100% of college students that were shooters were suicidal at the time of the shooting.
Wow.
We can assume that these individuals are deeply, deeply in despair.
Yeah.
We can make that assumption. And if they're even whispering any kind of ideology or any kind of conversation about an ideology that mass shooting is something you should even in many ways, shape, or form talk about in a glorifying way, we should be on alert. We should be aware of that, and we should say something. And I know, because I know how it goes unrecognized, because I remember I was in a conversation with, I think it was a 6-year-old and his older sister, an 11-year-old or 9-year-old. It was like, I love kids, you know, I love hearing their minds and everything. And all the adults were talking amongst themselves, and I'm kind of like talking to the kids because I'm a weirdo. I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody my age. I want to hear from children. Y'all are way cooler than us. But everyone thinks I'm so strange because I'm at an event and there's one child, and I'm just like, tell me about everything that you think of in your brain. Right. I'm like, I love this part of existence, the early life when it's untainted. I'm like, I want to learn from you. Please teach me, Buddha. This young boy, he said, I love violence. And quickly the adults were like, hey, don't say that. And I was like, please shut up, everybody, immediately, if not sooner. My favorite thing to say lately, immediately, if not sooner. Everyone shut up. And I said, you love violence? What do you love about it? And he was like, oh, I like violence. And I was like, oh, okay. So what about violence do you like? And he starts to explain to me, oh, I like shooting the heads of people on the game I play. I play this game and you can shoot off their head. And I was like, oh, okay. So what do you feel in your body when you do that? Like, what do you feel? What about it do you like? He goes, it feels satisfying. 6-year-old little boy said it felt satisfying. I said, this young man is communicating with us. We should listen.
Yeah.
He's needing something right now. He has something to express. Maybe it's the energy around him that's getting, like, all this rage and anger in the world is building up in his little body. Maybe he's an empath. His mother's an incredible woman. She's like such an empath. She can pick up on everybody's energy. She's like an oracle. It would make sense that her children would have sensitivities in the world to other energies. He could be picking up on people's repressed anger and needs to express sacred anger. And what did everybody immediately go to do? Don't say that. Not why.
Right.
Shut down, suppression. This is where we need to make a shift. This is where the shift needs to occur at the point of origin. And we talked, and obviously, like, he's never expressed anything like that. He got it out. He was validated. He was seen. He was able to express that it was satisfying to inflict violence on individuals that are avatars on a screen on his games. And he wasn't punished for it. He wasn't suppressed and shut down for it. Someone looked him in the face and listened to him and heard him. And what that can do is start to reduce the level of toxicity. Yeah. But what's the first thing that everyone does? Judge. You cannot sit there and hold space for someone that you're judging.
Right.
It's not possible. That's why I was scared to play this role, because I was like, if I'm sitting here judging her, I can't be kind and compassionate and hold a container for why she got to this point. So for me, that young man, like, I'm so grateful to him. He gave me an integrative lesson where I got to be a part of something that I believed it, because I know that so I wouldn't have done certain things that I've done to hurt people if someone had held space for me to let the toxic anger out that had been poisoning me on the inside, that I then needed to spew because I didn't know what else to do with it. If someone had held a container for me, if someone told me that anger was sacred and that I could ragefully express in a safe way and get that shit out of me, I wouldn't have hurt as many people as I've hurt in my life when I was trying to heal or before I was trying to heal. Right. So he taught me, and I'm so grateful to him, and I'm grateful to his mother, and I'm grateful because she just held space. She, like, let me have this conversation with him and didn't jump in and do what, I don't know how I would have responded. Some bitch being like talking to my kid like that. I'd be, excuse you, I will, what were you saying? I'm just going to say that. No. But, like, she just totally allowed me to have that conversation with her son. And we all talked about it later, obviously, because she's his mom. She obviously had feelings about her son saying that. But I was just like, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. That is communication. That's a little young man who, instead of holding it in the way we teach men to hold in all their emotions until they womanize or implode or go postal or do whatever it is that the masculine does with those toxic energies. At 6 years old, he was able to tell us something really full on, and we all held space for him. Like, thank you for being a conscious mom enough to know that moment needed to happen. Yeah. And I think that, these situations require us to challenge a very, very, very long heritage of generational programming.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Can we do that? Will we do that? Will we try?
Yeah.
That's the question for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because I found, I don't have children yet. So it's not like and I'm not around children very often. So I don't get to practice, right? These teachings that I'm learning and all the subconscious reprogramming, that is stuff that is, was just taught to me within the last 4 or 5 years. So it's still just a learning journey. And I mean, we're always going to be learning and healing and everything, but to actually have the moments and the situations to practice that integration of it is what I haven't been surrounded with in certain ways. Right. So I found myself, this was a few months ago, my best friends was hanging out with them and their children. And one of their little boys scraped his knee on the playground, right? And I immediately he looked at me I don't know if I should cry, I hurt myself, but I don't know. And I was like, you're okay. And his mom came over to him and immediately coddled him and picked him up, and then he definitely started crying. And when I looked at his leg, he actually did have a little scratch on it, and it was a little scraped up and stuff. And I immediately felt this wow, Kelly, you just dismissed him. You weren't it wasn't are you okay? I just immediately was you're okay.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of how we're conditioned to be brush it off. You're okay. You're fine, but it was interesting to see how she parented her child. It was totally opposite of how I did it. But I've been I listen to all these parenting advice online and stuff. And although I don't have kids, right, I'm listening to it and I'm oh my gosh, but I had a moment. But it was interesting because I brought it up to her months later. I was I just had to bring up this moment. And I apologized for the way that I treated your son.
Oh,
Hell, I didn't even hear you say that. And also it's fine, And I go,
yeah, she's you're fine.
I didn't even it's totally fine. But I was I know, but it was something that stuck out for me. And that it's about having that awareness. Okay. So next time, if something were to happen like that, is it going to be another me doing my conditioned response, or is it me going to have the awareness and that integration to be well, oh, you're hurting. Did that hurt you? And actually validate their feelings and bring that to life. So I love that you just said that though, and shared that story, because I think that that's it. It's having that just awareness and changing that narrative.
Yeah.
It starts with us.
Absolutely.
We have to do that.
Yeah. It makes me think of something. Actually, I want to I'm just looking on my phone because I want to see if I can find it. I think this is it. Something like this. There's Dr. Dan Siegel talks about the empathy ladder. And this says apathy, sympathy, compassion, empathy. But there was more to his ladder. It was 11 stages or something. And it was interesting because one of the levels of empathy was, you're making me uncomfortable by being hurt. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to make you feel better so that I don't have to feel this discomfort. And he explained it just giving money to someone on the side of the street because they're begging because you're so uncomfortable that they're in this situation. And it's really not about them, and it's actually about you. And it's because what you are explaining is that we're not conditioned to feel our emotions.
Right. And
we're not conditioned to hold a container for someone else who's feeling them in front of us. And this just happened to me yesterday. I was in the Delta Lounge. Everything should be fine if you're in the Delta Lounge. It's a lovely place to be. I'm very grateful for my Delta status. Thank you. A very wonderful, illustrious travel career that I've had in my life, which I'm very, very happy about. Might be the part of my ego that hasn't suppressed itself, hasn't grown, hasn't healed, hasn't done anything. It's just raging. Whenever you see me traveling, I'm a little bit of an egomaniac. It's excuse me, I have global entry, I have TSA pre-check, I have Claire, I have, I'm everyone get out of my way, I'm traveling. So there's there's room for all of us to work on ourselves. ourselves in this regard. I probably won't work on myself because I'm completely fine with it, but I should. So I'm in the Delta Lounge, and I'm just waiting for my flight, and my dear, sweet, wonderful, beloved friend is messaging me from his very tiny, small commuter plane in Costa Rica that has gotten caught in a cloud.
Oh.
And lightning has struck on all sides of the plane, front and back, side and side. The pilot, it's like a 15-passenger tiny commuter plane that goes from Liberia to San Jose. And he, oh my God, he can hear the pilots. They're just right there. I mean, you can see them. Like, he had actually sent me a video. When he got on the plane, he's like, wow. I was like, oh my God, it's so tiny, that plane. And we'd even messaged back and forth about that. And I could see the back of the heads of the pilot from the video. Like, he's like, it's the smallest plane ever. And he said the pilots are calling for emergency landing and in a field, in a just stretch of land, because it was so bad. They got stuck in this storm, and it was going down. They were going down fully destabilized, like just like wobbling all over the place. And then Ben got this just like guttural response, and he's very tapped in, and he said, "Do not land this plane." He like yelled it to the pilots through the plane. And they obviously were like, poor guys freaking out back there, like whatever, landing the plane. And right when they were about to land, the field got struck by lightning, and they had to swerve around the lightning bolt, further destabilizing the plane. This whole thing, he almost went down in a plane crash yesterday, my very close friend. And I remember as the information was coming through, I was like, surprisingly numb, to the level that my doctor would say, oh, something big here. Something big is here. Something big is here. And when he called me and he was safe on the ground and I could see his face, I went into hysterics, like just like scream crying, like into my jacket, like in the middle of the Delta Lounge, mind you. But I'm like, I'm so glad you're okay, like freaking out. And it was crazy how nobody did anything. They were like, I was in hysterics, crying, like ugly cry too, girl, like not cute, like snotting, like not it. Like, and they all were just pretending like it wasn't happening.
They were uncomfortable.
They were so uncomfortable with my discomfort. And then as I was finally like calming myself down, one person came from across the room and said, hey, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. And I had seen him earlier because he had this beautiful gold cross on his, and I had clocked his necklace, and I was like, oh, that's really nice. And it was like I had connected, and like energetically, there was a little connection to him prior. And he went back to, I said, I told him that my friend had almost died, and it was just really like had just happened all in real time. And when he went back to sit down, I was still talking to my friend on the phone. So he didn't want to disturb me, but he wanted to make sure I was okay. And I just was like, thank you so much, across the room back to him. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming over. Like, and I was still crying, and because I was just kind of like out of body at this point.
Right. Yeah.
But that's how insane, right? And I totally understand, because all of those people were sitting there feeling all this stuff because of what was happening to me. And their mind was saying, don't get involved. That's none of your business. Don't do that. Don't make her feel weird. Don't make her feel weirder than she already is. Like, like there were so many probably thoughts going on in the minds of all the people there. And this one man went beyond. It obviously took him a minute to get the courage. But he went beyond whatever thoughts maybe were programmed into him. And he was just like, he chose compassion. But that feeling of what type of empathy, what's the ladder? On the ladder, where are we at? And if you look at the first scene of my film, it's really interesting because there's an interaction with Eve before she walks in. She thinks everybody's closed into the sanctuary at this point, and she's kind of slowly walking in and really kind of steeling herself and reeling and deciding in the moment that she really is going to do this. And there was a flashback of in the film with her, like, she wanted to be a mom so badly, and there was a little baby, and her name was Hope, and this was one of the parts I reflected most on the film, was this flashback where she asked if she could hold her, and she was holding on to hope.
Yeah,
was the symbolism.
Yeah.
And the father, Hope's father, came in at the moment when she's walking in to do what she's going to do in the church. And she has this moment of reality check, and she's like committed, and she's going to do this. So then she's like, you need to get Hope and get your wife, and you need to go to the other church for a minute, and you have to go to the priest's office. I left something for you. You have to go there now. And she was just like adamant that she wasn't going to let this little girl be a part of this.
Wow.
This little girl named Hope. And the symbolism was so profound to me. And as an actor, you're always peeling the layers, and you're so dramatic with it. And it's like, oh, she's holding on to hope, But really, she was holding on to hope. And she had lost her feeling that she had a chance at being the mom she'd wanted to be. And she had lost all of these things, and she had decided that her life was over. She was okay with it ending and her not getting out alive. And because that is the theme that the research suggests goes along with these mass shootings in our country, I was really, that one hit as well. Like, that was one of the moments that really hit for me with the film. I think ultimately it's conversation.
Yeah.
It's holding space. It's containers. It's that little moment with that young 6-year-old boy where maybe his life goes in a different trajectory because he got to express something that had been kind of just living inside of him, because he didn't know the word satisfied.
Right.
At first, he had to check in with himself, and he only did a self check-in because we were talking to him about what he was feeling and why he liked violence. And that check-in, that muscle, he worked out a muscle that, if that muscle is Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day, if that's Terminator level muscles that we create from doing self check-ins, we don't get to that pressure cooker boiling point where we act out of reactionary response over clear thought, clarity of mind, homeostasis of the body, response time. And it's why this issue is simple.
Yeah.
The aspect of it that's not easy is just that it's really hard to teach an old dog to do new tricks.
Yeah.
Really hard to unwire and rewire. And it's impossible if we don't have language around it.
Right.
So thank you for letting us talk about this and have language around it, because that's that is so, that right there is part and parcel to this actually being something that shifts. It has to start with a thought. It has to become something informed. Conversation gives it life and breath. And then can those ideologies be more commonplace? I mean, think about how long we've been trying to have mental health not be stigmatized.
Right.
But if you look at the span of human history, we only started talking about mental health in the last, century plus, maybe century and a half or so, where it was even a profession. It's only been a couple 100 years, maybe. And now it's a common conversation that we can have in the news outlet, we can have on these forums, in these platforms. It's something that men are talking about more than they ever have. And that was the least likely because they just from day one are literally made to buckle up their bootstraps. And instead of seeing us as men and women and whatever, it's human when you're talking about health, brain health, heart health. They're the same thing. If we say it all the time in what we do, but it's like you would go see your cardiologist if you have an issue with your heart. So if something's going on with your brain, it's exactly the same thing, and there should be nothing around it to stop you from getting exactly the help you need immediately. Right. And if we hear that someone we love has, a heart issue, what are we all going to do? Well, you should get that checked out.
Right.
We wouldn't just be like, well, I hope you don't die. Well, good luck with that heart murmur. It's kind of silly. It's like, we would want this individual to get the help they need. So if we hear someone say something about being in a dark place or wanting to hurt somebody else or themselves, or even laughing or joking and idealizing or making it out to be something idyllic when it's clearly the opposite, we need to take that as seriously as we would take someone who just broke their femur,
Right. Absolutely.
That's my 2 cents worth anyway.
Oh, I totally agree. I absolutely agree. And I mean, again, it's like you're starting with the children, but you have to start with yourself too, right? It's a co-creation of things. And, I think I told you this, but I've been volunteering at a mental health residence here in Atlanta. And I mean, literally 6 months ago, I did not even know this place existed. And it's literally one of the top mental health residences for adolescents in the country. I'm like, it's 15 minutes from my house. I'm like, that's crazy, but I didn't even know it existed. But one of the guy friends that volunteers with me, we had this conversation about a month ago, and because I missed the volunteer day, and he went, and he was like, it was really neat because they do divide, they have the girls, and then they have the guys, and the girls we play sports with, and the guys we'll play sports with. And it's just so fun. But he was elaborating how he goes, oftentimes the girls are very open and they're excited that we're there and everything. He goes, but the guys were so expressive this time, and they were so excited that we were there, and that wow, the volunteers are here, we love this, and he was like, it's just really neat because that's where it needs to start. It starts with the children. If we can impact their lives, can you imagine how their life is going to look different in 10, 20 years from now if we can start making a difference at that level, and I was like, absolutely.
Yes.
I was like, and we need to ourselves as adults, like you said, it's teaching a dog new tricks. It's easy, while it's also challenging because we've been so conditioned, and depending on your age, it's okay, are you 40 years conditioned to think and believe one certain way, or are you 5 years of conditioned to think? And, it may not be as easy to train your brain to think and respond and react in a completely new way that is going to be most beneficial for you and everyone.
Yeah. But to your point, that it's starting with children, and I know you've done a lot of inner child work, but there's a child inside of all of us, right? And if we start there, it becomes a lot easier than a rewiring process, actually, and a 40 years in habits and all of that. It actually becomes a lot easier if you go to the root and cut off the head of the snake, right? And the root cause is I rarely say always, but it's always in early childhood. It's always in early life. It's wherever your first moment was, and all of your firsts happen in early life, right? So you have a few firsts that you'll have in your adult life, but by then you're pretty well conditioned as a human, and pretty much all of your origin points started in the first 0 to 13, 0 to 18 years of life. And a lot of them are 0 to 7.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's really where it counts, because at those ages, your brain is in delta for 0 to 2, and 2 to 6, 2 to 7 is theta brainwave states. You're in the deepest level of the brain that only codes the subconscious mind. Conscious thoughts not being coded really. It's subconscious mind. That's the arena of the subconscious mind, is the theta brainwave state. And so you're a sponge. You're soaking up the world. And I read something recently. It's not the ones who scare us into belief systems that affect us the deepest. It's the ones who are kind. When we think someone's being nice to us, and they put into our mind, incept into our mind their belief system that's not good for our well-being long term, just because it's what they did and their grandmother and their grandparents and blah, blah, blah. Those are actually the most invasive. Because they cut all the way into the very, very deepest point, and you never feel the slice because it's like a scalpel. And I was talking to one of my friends about this the other day, because there was an incident when I was like, when was the first time you heard this voice? Because what you're saying to me is somebody else's voice, and that voice is coded into you, and I know it started somewhere. Where's the first time you heard it? And he's like, hold on, let me look. And he goes in his mind and he does the thing, because he's a teacher and all the things. And he said, I've got it. I was like 5 or 6 years old. And he tells me this whole story. And the outcome of it was that the father was screaming at him, but his mother was very gently and very kindly saying, we don't do that. We do this. And from that moment, the code that he should look out for other people over himself began. 5, 6 years old. And it wasn't dad. Dad was destabilizing his system and making him feel completely unsafe, like a tiger is chasing him through the Serengeti. Mom was the point of solace. Mom was the point of consolation. She was being nice. And it got right in. That belief system started for him. And we were like, let's eradicate that shit now and clear it, uproot it from that point. So if we're capable as adults, if we're capable and if we're willing of and to choose to believe that it does in fact start with children across the board, and we go to that child part of ourselves. And we it's not easy, but if we choose to go in and look at those places, the hardest part is looking at the child self with compassion. It's so crazy the amount of people I work with who are like, yeah, but she should have known. But I'm like, you're talking to a 5-year-old. Don't you dare talk to a 5-year-old like that in my presence. I don't care if the 5-year-old is inside of your body. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're so aggro. I'm like, yes. You want to see how aggro I can get? Keep trying me. I'm like, I do not suffer fools when it comes to inner child children of any sort, big, little, or fully absolved inside of a physical adult person. I'm like, no. So I have actually heard people say, like, I'm like, okay, what would you say to your 10-year-old self I'd say, listen, it's going to get really tough. So you're just going to have to And I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm so sorry. I thought that I said 10-year-old self, a 10-year-old as in a child, as in someone who's in like, elementary school and or whatever. Is that elementary school?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
middle
fifth grade.
school, whatever, child. Okay. I was homeschooled, so I forget the tiers of it all. It was all like homeschool K through 12, that you're just in one big group. But I am always amazed at the lack of compassion.
Yeah.
And it is because there's a barrier there that's kept them safe by making the child so distanced from themselves. But yet an extension of, so I can treat you like crap.
Right.
So there's that, and there's also the child self not trusting the adult self, which is what I dealt with. And I had to, get my doctor. I was like, she doesn't trust me. She leaves. I go in my mind to talk to my little self and she leaves me. And she's like, well, you made the house she lived in very unsafe for a long time. Yeah. You're going to have to build her trust.
Yeah.
And I did. I had to beg and plead, and oh my goodness, nobody takes precedence over my little Anna. I'm like, I care about none of you. If little Anna is unhappy, all of you take a step back. Goodbye. And I've held her because I was afraid. I was afraid to lose her trust again. And I made a promise, and I don't make promises. I don't, I've always had a little FOC issue, a little fear of commitment. I don't make promises because I keep the ones that I make. And I made her a promise that I was never going to leave her in harm's way. I was never going to leave her unseen and unheard and unloved ever again. That those moments might happen from outside sources, but they wouldn't happen from me anymore.
No.
And in order to honor that, nobody gets number one but me.
Yeah.
I have to hold the number one slot, because otherwise I can't honor that promise, and I will always honor that promise. Till the day I die. And I show my friends, I show the people that I love an example. They want to know what I'm doing, why I'm happy, why my life has changed so dramatically. I'm like, because I'm taking care of numero uno. I'm committed the Buddhist way. The greatest gift that you can offer the world is your most healed self, right? I can't do that if I'm trying to heal everybody else, which is so arrogant to think that you can heal somebody else. Shut up. The greatest healers, the only healers, are healers that bring the healer within someone else out in them and show them the path to their own healer within themselves. We have all the answers within ourselves. We give over blind faith, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, like Eve, and it's a cop out, or it's a dangerous obedience tactic, but it is not truly living. It is not true existence. It's not what we're here for. So we're invited, as I always like to say, we're invited to offer ourselves and the world the greatest possible thing we can give. And that's a fully loved self. Because a fully loved self doesn't walk into a church with an AR-15 and shoot 20 people.
Right.
That will never happen. Not by someone who fully loves themselves. No individual who fully loves himself will ever do that. And no person who's ever done that has fully loved themselves. Right. And that's the part that I think breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Because I know that those shooters are carrying a world of hurt on them, way heavier than all their Kevlar and all their artillery. And what they decided to do with it is to perpetrate it out onto other people. Because that's the lens through which they see the world. Yeah. That's how dark their world is. So I was able to stop judging my character clearly. And in the process, I feel like I have language that we could use if we would, if as one of my friends likes to say, he's in politics, and he always says, when the problem stops being more beneficial than the solution, we'll actually solve things.
Yeah.
And that's the other aspect of it. And that's something entirely different and yet the same, because people who are using problems for their own benefit, they aren't happy people either.
Right. Absolutely.
They're carrying a different world of hurt. Mm-hmm. A belief that it's dog eat dog out there, and lack mindset, and you have more than I have less. And that's not true either.
Yeah.
So conversations, holding two thoughts in our mind that are opposing, seems to be a lost art, or an art that no one has any interest in right now. There's so much talk about AI, and it's so funny for me. I always say, like, I have a lot less fear for AI than I do for human robots.
Yeah.
Because an AI is based on the intention of the individual instructing it. You can ask ChatGPT a lot of questions.
Right.
I ask them things like, how old is the world? How old is the universe? Is it really true what they say? Are there other theories that I should know? Are aliens coming in 2025? That's what I heard. Is it my family? Am I an alien? These are the questions I ask ChatGPT. But, they're the individual who's coding out the requests and the intention. That's a lot more terrifying to me if you're someone who's incapable of critical thinking skills, because you are in an education system that educated out of you the ability to think for yourself. That's terrifying to me.
That is terrifying.
That's terrifying. Sheeple, bandwagoners, individuals who follow trends without ever questioning whether or not they actually believe what they're saying, doing, and following. Mm-hmm. Those people scare me.
Yeah.
It's because I have a healthy reverence for what neurotypical followers who fall in line are capable of. And that stems from Dr. Nasir Gaimi's work. He is a historian researcher, and he diagnoses postmortem. So based on the writings and personal letters of individuals, he gives the clearest diagnosis possible, because it's not being shielded by the representative in the room to the therapist. You're actually getting personal writings. And he wrote a book called A First-Rate Madness: The Connection, or the Link Between Mental Health and Leadership, or mental illness and leadership, I believe. And he talks about Hitler. He talks about Hitler. He talks about the 1940s Germany and the high-ranking officials. So Adolf Hitler was severely bipolar. It was being exacerbated by a doctor who was intravenously administering him methamphetamine 5 times a day, which is terrible for someone who's a completely normal person. Someone who has mania, someone who has severe manic depression, bipolar, an amphetamine is the single worst thing you can give a person. Right. But the doctors were perturbed by the fact that the high-ranking officials, the ones who actually carried out all the atrocities that Hitler commanded, he didn't do that shit. He had other people do it. The ones who carried it out, the doctors were so perturbed because every single one of them came back neurotypical, completely normal. They altered their diagnoses and made them all crazy, because they couldn't believe that normal people would do this to other people.
Huh.
And it was found out, and then the court ordered that they had to go back and re-diagnose. And so they took the names of the officers off of the forms, the intake forms, and they all came back neurotypical. And what Dr. Nasir Gaimi says about that is that if any of them, the high-ranking officials under Adolf Hitler, if any of them had been neurodivergent, they would have stepped out of line. They would have most likely said, no, I'm not doing this, because their mind would give them the room to go outside the box. But because they were neurotypical and conditioned and programmed by a system that says you fall in line and follow chain of command, they did exactly that. And they didn't question these atrocious, insane orders that were being handed down to them by a man who was clinically insane. But if you look at him by all counts, as a leader, he was leading in a very powerful way. He was just doing really horrible things with his leadership skills. So Dr. Nasir Gaimi talks about an individual who has a mental health concern but is in leadership, how amazing they can be when they're not being there's a lot going on with Hitler. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But on top of it being administered methamphetamine, like that was going nowhere good. On top of being someone who clearly was conditioned and programmed with a very biased prejudice to begin with. It was exacerbated by his disorder. It was exacerbated by the methamphetamine and all of these different things, and probably being power hungry and a million other things. But JFK was diagnosed manic depressive, the Kennedys, based on this same doctor. And he was being treated with uppers, with amphetamines, in the first year and a half of his term. And the Bay of the Pigs happened. It was a nightmare, the whole thing. But his father kicked everyone out of the White House, all the doctors, said, get out, all of you. Brought in new doctors, got his son on a different medication regimen. He was suddenly being given barbiturates, which was what they did at the time. It was amphetamines or barbiturates. Put his son on downers. Suddenly, he calmed his mania. And in the Cuban Missile Crisis, he completely avoided, what could have been nuclear because he was able to think outside of the box. But his mind was being supported by a treatment plan that worked with him, not against him. And so the book's fascinating. It's really incredible. But it affirmed a lot of things for me, which is that neurodivergence. Let's move in that direction. Let's make sure that we have proper support and treatment and care for all of the things within that scope. But fall in line energy with what's going on in our world and the way leaders are today, like I can't say I'm interested in fall in line.
No.
I like an outlier.
Yeah. Same. Yeah, same. That is fascinating. What was the name of that book called again?
It's A First-Rate Madness, the link or the connection between mental illness and leadership.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really interesting to read.
Dr. Nasir Gaimi. Yeah, really, really amazing read. And he goes through everybody, like Neville Chamberlain, who's neurotypical. He was like, I had lunch with Adolf and he sounds like a lovely fellow. I think we're going to be just fine. No need to think about war. Neville, bless your heart. But Winston Churchill, for all his flaws, he's also did some pretty incredible things. But he predicted Hitler would start World War II. And they kicked him out of Parliament. They said he was crazy. And then they asked him back because he was right. So, and he dealt with severe depression his whole life. On his deathbed, wrote 42 books, did all these things. On his deathbed, he said, I failed at everything in my life.
Wow.
Mahatma Gandhi, depression, lifelong depression. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., lifelong depression. Abraham Lincoln, he walks you through a lot of leaders and their mental health journeys. And he says that a neurodivergent leader in times of crisis can be all you need to change the trajectory of what's going wrong.
Interesting.
A neurotypical leader during times of peace is ideal, because a neurodivergent one might create problems that aren't there. That could happen. They're like, let's make this more exciting.
Yeah.
So it's important, that the environment we bring them into and their mental health space is looked at and a part of the consideration. But it's a really beautiful read. Yeah, it's a really fascinating read.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I really do want to read that, because one, for the history knowledge, but just like to have that understanding, that's like really neat to learn about that leadership and just having, different perspectives on things.
It makes you look at our leaders in a very different way. It was an easy read. It was so enthralling, and it was so well put together, but so informative, and it really gives you just a broader look. I think sometimes when we see people out in the world, there's this, they're not fully human, or they're not fully, there's a difference that we create, a distance between us, perhaps. And no, these are normal people, some of whom should not be in leadership, or should be doing different things, playing different roles. And I think that was what it helped me gain insight to as well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, okay, so going back to the film, did they present this film to you and ask you to play this star role? Or, okay, they did.
Yeah, they asked me to play the role. It was really interesting. So it was the fall of 2021, and the producer and director are an adorable gay couple. They've been together for years and years, lived in Sedona for like 17 years or something, and now live in Scottsdale. And they just they do these films that are films of meaning. They're more so the why they do it. And they bring in the whole community, all of Sedona, anybody in Scottsdale that they know. They try to use places, properties that friends own, and they just try to incorporate the local community. And it's kind of a thing they all do together. They do a friendship raise, so they'll raise the funds amongst themselves as much as they can. So this was really a passion project. But Tommy was explaining, the director was explaining how he decided that he wanted to offer the film to me. And they were together, sitting there on Halloween, we should watch a scary movie. It's Halloween, and so they happened upon a film called Excision, which was me, who in a role that did not look, sound, or in any way, shape, or form seem like me. So they watched this whole film and they were like, we need to find out who this actress is. She's perfect for this role, da, 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 da. And they looked me up and they're like, wait, that's her? They did not know that I was that the actress who played Excision was 90210 Naomi Clark, all this stuff. So this is far cry from Naomi Clark with this character. And so they were even more excited because they were like, whoa, if this woman can do this, she's our girl. But we're just gonna have to say she's our dream girl because this is a low budget, will it really happen, blah 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 blah. And so of course they don't know that I'm just a sucker for a low budget indie. You're barely gonna pay me, you're gonna have me filming in 115 degrees in Phoenix in the summer, and we may or may not get to promote our film because there might be a SAG actors and writers strike going on. Definitely sign me up. So they called and they were like, we would love to possibly get AnnaLynne for this. And AnnaLynne's over there having an existential crisis, I can't do this project. Yes, I'll do it, So there was so much that actually took place without either party knowing what was going on. And when we talked on set, it was really funny because I didn't know, obviously, the story. They were like, did your team tell you how we found you? And they were like, we found Excision. And that's always really nice for me. Excision was that was the first time I felt like I got to be able to do something where I wasn't constantly being second guessed anymore. Like I could be like, no, I actually am a real actress. Would you like to see? There was an idea of me. Most people in the industry saw Nip Tuck, but didn't relate Nip Tuck to 90210. And then most people knew of 90210, but never saw it. So they assumed that I was just kind of like this like campy, you know, high school show actress. And I would get this flack, this energy, you know, this negative energy because of it. And after Excision and a couple of other independent films, I created a real cult following in the indie world. And people were like, so I have like really different fans that span the spectrum. The ones who cross-pollinate and found me in both worlds are like, what? She did that? That bitch this? Like what? So it's really funny. But they were, it was fun to kind of share stories, swap stories about like how we ultimately came to do this, because there was a 6-month period where after they offered me the role, it just didn't happen. And I was like, oh, it's the universe. The universe just wanted me to say yes. And I was a good girl and said yes. And now I don't have to do this film that I didn't want to do. And then the universe was like, no, that's not it. No. You are doing this film. But yeah, so the whole thing came to be in a really, I would say this is the most guided project that I've done in my career, because every step of the way has been just, I have checked in with, talk about self check-ins, every detail I've been self-checking, like, okay, is this what we're doing? Is this how we're doing it? Is this how we're promoting it? Is this what we're going to say? And I have to be honest, like, for as much as it sounds like it was all over the place and things were up and down and the strike and all the things, the flow has actually been so easy. And you start to realize that when you surrender, active surrender, it's not a passive thing, and it's not for the faint of heart. No. Surrender is not for the faint of heart. Surrender is no easy feat, especially not for a little middle fingers to the sky warrior bitch rebel like me. Like, I'm like, you want me to surrender? I never surrender. Surrender has been the thing that has transformed my life. And with this project, it called for every level of surrender, from just like surrendering that I'm sweating in every part of my body that I didn't even know sweats when I was in Arizona in the summer, to like surrendering to what the process was going to look like with promotion, with the strike happening. You know, every bit of it has required me to actively put my thinking mind aside and trust that there's something bigger at play here, because the heart and the intention and the foundation of those things that built this film are so pure and so hopeful to be of service, to give value, to not just be entertainment, but to be using the platform that we're given to talk about something that we feel is important. So it's, surrender. Oh man.
And I mean, granted, you know, the film it airs the 22nd. So
so Condition of Return premieres September 22nd, and then it's streaming October 24th, but we'll be on VOD as well for the first month. So
got it. What the Condition of Return, what does the title exactly mean?
Well, you're gonna have to watch and find out, aren't you? No, it's actually a phrase that is, I'm not going to give away where it's actually revealed in the film, but essentially the phrase suggests that if you were to return something, the condition of your return matters, right? So if you want to return, you know, you're like, I didn't like that outfit, I want to take it back and return it. They're like, you took the tags off of it, you got it muddy and it's wrinkled up and disgusting, we're not returning this. Or you bring it back pristine with tags in place and maybe you get, you know, a store credit. Right. But so the condition of the return is actually like, what what are you willing to, in this particular thing, is what are you willing to do to receive the return? That kind of like, it's she's, you know, she's dabbling in interesting things in this film, and it kind of suggests karmic return in a way. There's between the first analogy and karmic return, somewhere in between is where condition of return lands. But karmic return, meaning that I've done things maybe from not the greatest space of intention, and I have to now karmically return that debt. Yeah. So somewhere between those two analogies, condition of return lands. Okay. And then I'll let you watch the movie to find out the actual.
I know, I'm so excited. Okay, so last question. When they pitched the concept of the film to you, and when you read the script, were there two different feelings?
Well, the offer comes in as an email. Typically, we're very impersonal these days. So it's like, offer for this film, condition of return, whatever. Here's the offer. Here's the script. Blah blah blah. Okay. So I'm just like casually, skimming through my phone. I'm like, whoa, holy first scene. What the? So the first scene both deterred me and intrigued me at the same time, incredibly deterring because of everything that's going on in the world, and this is the scene of the mass shooting. And then it was intriguing to me that someone would think that this was okay to write. Like when I first read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not okay. Like, you can't do this. Right. You cannot write this. Like, this can't exist. And it was just so intense. So I needed to know where it went. I needed to know why the hell they thought that they should write that in a script, especially on page 1. And the journey that the film takes you on is one of toxic theology and themes of these narratives and tropes that we've all understood and known to be as very kind of one note, but they're all put together, and you see the nuance, and you see the humanity. The humanness, I should say, of it all. And I was like, oh no, oh man, I don't want to do this, and I have to.
No, but it's amazing, and so proud of you for taking this on, because I mean, not just my podcast here, but yes, you're being asked and interviewed to talk about the film. However, it is leading to much more deeper conversations that we need to talk more about. So that's amazing.
That's the part that got me. And that's the part that always gets me, actually. It's like, that part will get me more than anything else. Like, I'll do pretty much anything if I think that it's going to have meaning and value in the world in a bigger way. If it doesn't, I don't even know how to talk about it. These things matter so much to me at this point in my life that I'm like, I'm just going to sound like an idiot. Like, I took this role because it was just, a role to do. Like, I don't know, what do I say? Like, I need it to mean something. So I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I'm so grateful for platforms not unlike yours that allow for a bigger conversation around it. And I'm just excited to see what little life of its own it takes once it's out there in the world. And hopefully, even if it's conversations that aren't super fun, hopefully it sparks conversations, and that people are able to bring more language around this, because that creates inertia, it creates energy in the world towards hopefully what is a common goal. So
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And we all need to take a look at our little child and nurture him or her. Please nurture them.
nurture the little ones inside and outside, in the body, in the adult bodies, and the little ones on the outside who are just discovering existence for the first time.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for being here, and I always enjoy talking with you. So thank you. And everyone, when can we watch the film again?
September 22nd, Condition of Return premieres in theaters. It's getting a limited theatrical release, and it'll be on VOD. And then October 24th, it'll be on streaming.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, everyone, check it out. Go check out AnnaLynne's. Where can they find you on Instagram? What's your handle again?
You can go to @the AnnaLynne McCord, and I am on there on Instagram, and I am AnnaLynne MCC on Twitter or X.
What's it called? X now?
It's called X now.
Well, yeah, everyone go connect with AnnaLynne. She's just a fabulous human and has done a lot of work on herself, and listen to our previous podcast episode too. Yeah, it's incredible. So just great. You just a fabulous human. And I love that.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. This was fun.
It was. If you loved this episode, please download, share, rate, and review. If you are ready to step into that next level version of you and grow your business and bank account, it's time to unleash your goddess magic and chase life with Kelly. You can start this epic expansion journey by diving into the Goddess Magic course bundle found at chaselifetogether.com. Please connect with me on Instagram at chaselifewithkelly. Join the Chase Life with Kelly Facebook community and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Till next time, create the life you crave, babe, and chase life with Kelly.